I don't know if you're tested, fine, but we will test along with. So let me start asking you. Is it possible to add a parameterized constructor in a servlet? Quick 2 minutes recap. Yes or no is the answer question. No. Even if you add a default and parameterized, which one will get called? Default constructor will get called, obviously. Next thing. If I say I cannot pass any arguments via parameterized constructor, is there any way to parameterize the servlet? Is there any way to pass the initialization parameters to the servlet? Does the way exist? Answer is yes. So what is that answer? Using not service config, servlet config. Okay. So what is servlet config? Interface or a class? I or C? It is an interface. Where is the implementation class? In the server provided jar. So for Tomcat, the name of that jar is Catalina.jar. Got me? Okay. Next. So servlet config represents servlet specific configuration. So for example, if there are 10 servlet classes, 10 servlet instances in the heap, how many servlet config objects would be there in the heap? 1 or 10? Answer is 10. So answer is 1 per servlet. That makes it 10. Now the next one. If you want to write a database independent web application where my DB utils is not hard coded with the database parameters, we can always parameterize it, right? So now open it in a proper sequence. So here, let's open it the way your web container opens. So I'm just recapping it and we'll test. If there are any problems, we'll fix it. Okay. So here, first open web.xml. You say Control-Shift-W, close everything. Let us recap in next 2 minutes and test it and then go to the next topic. Start. So the moment you see this servlet deployment tags, everyone knows. Are we deploying this login servlet through annotation or through XML? Through XML. Can I ever can I ever deploy the servlet using both annotations and XML? Never. You see the ambiguity. Everyone knows that. Now the next thing. If you already knew basic tags, servlet name, servlet class, and load on startup, and you already knew servlet name and the URL pattern. So if you want to pass servlet specific initialization parameters, what is the name of the tag? Init param. What are the child tags you have? Parameter name, parameter value. The moment I say parameter, is it going to have string name, string value, or string name object value? S, or S, O, string, string. And whenever we are talking about request scoped attributes, session scoped attributes, later context scoped attributes or page scoped attributes, what it will be? String, string or string, object. Attribute name, still string, but the attribute value object. So the parameter names being the read only, because you are going to read them. There is no API which will set the parameter. They will be read only, inherently thread safe. Regarding attributes, we'll talk differently. We'll talk separately. Okay. So having that said, how many init parameters are we injecting? Are we supplying to this servlet? I said how many? Everyone understands it. So there are 3. And which ones? Database configuration parameters, database contacting URL, username, and password. So tell me openly, frankly, is everyone clear so far? As far as the web.xml is concerned? Okay. So now the next thing you should open is what? The login servlet, because that is where the parameters are going to be injected. So please open 6.3 login servlet. Is it going to, okay, I hope everyone has commented it. If you want, you can delete it so that there's zero confusion. The moment you don't have it there, it is already in the XML, so no issues. So now start answering. The life cycle is what? Lazy or eager? Eager. So container will start. Which steps we see today is a day of, last day of servlet. I mean, recapping everything, putting all the things together in the servlet. So the container will start the life cycle right at the application deployment time. When you say right click, run as run on server. And the first thing it will do, it will look into WebINF classes and load the, which class? Login servlet class. Then what is it is going to call? A default constructor. How do you know? That is by the SOP. So tell me, in default constructor, when the container has called the default constructor, has servlet config object been injected, been supplied, or will it be null? 100% you are going to see the null value, because you know the life cycle. I've shared that diagram. So the servlet config object will be created after this instantiation and before init. Okay, so this you will see on the screen. I mean, in default constructor, null. Now, which is the first method in the life of this thing? Servlet is init, but container does not jump from constructor to init. What is it in between it will do? Servlet container will create instance of servlet config. It creates the servlet config object. In this case, in our case, will the object be empty or will it be populated? E or P? Of course, populated. Populated with how many init parameters? 3 init parameters. Everyone with me? Okay, next one. So now, so the steps are there in that servlet lifecycle. So it will create the empty servlet config, and if there are any init parameters, it will populate it. Now check carefully. Have we used the init method with the servlet config argument? Answer is no. If you use that overloaded method, then you don't have to call this get servlet config, but you have to call something called a super.init. So that difference later. So here, how do I access the servlet config? There is a getter. Where is this method coming from? Just keep a cursor here. It is implemented by your generic servlet class. Everyone should know the hierarchy. Servlet interface, implemented by GS, generic servlet, extended by HTTP servlet, further extended by our login servlet. So you are using the inherited API. So by the time the control comes to the init method, will config object, what is it called? Null or not null? 100% not null. The dependency, okay, the giving the dependency, I mean adding that servlet config object is done. Now, which is the method of a servlet config? To read these initialization parameters, just take the cursor here, get init parameter, read. Gets the value of the initialization parameter with a given name. Okay, so what goes in? String. What does it return? String. Parameter in the middle of night, string comma string, read only, inherently thread safe. So now I'm finding out 3 values. Which 3 values? Database contacting URL, DB URL, username and a password. So the question, tomorrow if you decide to change the database from MySQL to let's say Oracle, which of the following will have to change? Java code or XML configuration file, or both or neither? Everyone knows the answer. I hope everyone has understood. Only the changes we have made it, we kept it external. Only the property file, only that configuration file has to change. So now I can say that my web application is at least partially database independent. Only thing which will change from database to database is maybe the query syntax, nothing else. Now, so this is, so now I have called the method. So please say control click. There was there was confusion earlier. So now the control comes here. So now tell me, what is happening in this method? Are we returning the existing connection or are we creating a new connection here? It is creating a new connection. And guys, I have anyway achieved the singleton. Why? How I have achieved the singletoning of connection instance? How many times init method will get called? Exactly once. So how many times are we really calling this open connection method now? Exactly once. So there is no fear. I keep telling you, this is not a scalable solution. So wait for Hibernate and we'll replace this single turning of connection by the connection pool. You'll see Hibernate will manage all of it. So when I say open connection, the call goes to driver manager.get connection, and here the connection instance, here we are establishing the database connection method returns. Come back here. 100% clear about line number 44, 45. I mean, so far, zero questions. Zero confusion. Okay. Now let me go further. So now connection is established. Now let us create and keep those DAO instances ready. So now control click on the next one. So now here, user DAO implementation. And are we creating a new connection here, or are we getting an existing connection here? Creating or getting? Of course, getting. Don't trust. If you're not sure, just say control click, open the declaration, sorry, and tell me what is happening. We are managing the open connection exactly once in the servlet, and then we are following it by get connection and the same pattern. So, okay, let me say before I go ahead, suppose I call from these three, where are these three? There are three DAOs, right? In my case study, it's a small case study, so three. You might have 30. I mean, 30 is too much, but okay, 10, 15 in your projects. So the point is, if I'm calling this three DAO instances, are they having their own separate connection instance, or are they sharing the same again? I mean, how many connections? One or multiple? Connection is one. And how we have achieved it today? Because I wanted to reconfigure all this. We have achieved it by calling that open connection once, by sending the parameters, and hereafter we are simply getting the existing connection. And destroy method we never touch. So we are first cleaning up the DAO layer, which closes the prepared statements and everything. And finally, we are closing the connection, which was opened right in the beginning. So tell me, are all the steps and the explanation on the concept clear? No confusion, absolutely. Okay, great. So I think we have done it correctly. Let's just run it and confirm. You might have already tested it. I don't know. So say remove all, finish. And I'm not going to run the whole case study. All I'm going to check is it working here? I mean, rest of the case study is anyway working. You all know that. So here, please open the console and confirm. So is your web container calling the default constructor right in the beginning? Of course, yes. Those init service destroy method are instance method. It has to create. But is the servlet config available or not yet available? Not yet available. You got me? Now, by the time it calls the init method, is your servlet config available or still not available? Available. Guys, you should be always watchful. I mean, observant. Good observer is equal to good programmer. Check this out. What does this tell you? Are we using that servlet config interface, or are we using that implementation class internally from that Catalina jar? See, this is a POC. This is a proof of concept. So in short, tomorrow, if you change the web server from Tomcat to, let's say, WebLogic to JBoss, will your code change, as in will your servlet config interface change or no change? Servlet config will not change, but this internal implementation class, change or no change? 100% change. So automatically, today we are adding a Tomcat server. Later you could be adding a WebLogic, WebSphere, whatever J2E server, and automatically changes will be ported. This is what is your server independence. Making sense to everyone? Following things? Great. And rest of the things are the same. Now we are just creating the DAO instances and it works. So like I said, I'm not interested in, continuing with the case study that we have tested. Now let us introduce the bug purposefully. We'll check whether it is just generally working or really working types. So open the web.xml and change something. For example, change the port number. At least my server doesn't work on 3308. My MySQL server is listening on HTTP port 3306. So make the purposeful change, intentional mistake. But guys, when you change the XML, the application doesn't reload. So you will have to reload it. You will have to restart it. So make the purposeful mistake, I mean intentional mistake, what I meant is, and run it and just check whether it is failing this time. So go back to the console. All answers are on the console and tell me exception, I mean working or not working. 100% it should fail. Because my listener, my web server, not web server, what is it called? MySQL server is working on what? 3306. So there is no connect, nobody is listening on 3308, connection refused. So in short, the proof, the point I'm saying is, it is actually picking up that those, DB URLs, username and password, and working accordingly. All statements clear? Zero confusion, guys? Okay, so before you forget, change it back to correct value. And let's continue with the remaining part of the servlet lifecycle. So let me open the servlet lifecycle once again. Okay. Diagrams. So where we had reached, we had discussed the initialization sequence totally. So now let me ask you, if the initialization fails, if it throws you any exception, if the init method throws itself any exception, is container going to continue with the remaining life cycle, or is it going to abort the life cycle? 100% it will abort. Everyone knows it. You have seen it. We have discussed all of it. So now, if I say here, next part, it will only continue to the servicing phase if and only if initialization succeeds. So here I should have written, you can add, provided initialization succeed, then the container will go to the next level. So now let us take a pause. Let us take a pause. So start answering. Are we ever going to write a web application for single user or multiple users? Same old question. Multiple users. So currently when you are working on the local host, I cannot really simulate the concurrent requests. Concurrent request means what? 10 users sending me 10 requests concurrently. How can I achieve concurrency when I'm having a local host? But the moment you deploy your application in the cloud, whatever cloud, whatever remote IP, then of course there will be concurrency, there will be pressure. Are you understanding? So anytime you want to handle the concurrency, what is it you have to use? What is for handling concurrency? What is it we use? Threads. So threads represent a separate, parallel, asynchronous flow of control. So naturally, naturally threads are required. So anyone wants to tell me? Suppose I say thread. What will these threads represent? I'm saying, okay, I understood your answer, threads. No, not runnable task this time. I have a different question. Give me a chance. If I say there are 10 threads, what do these 10 threads represent? Not a task. Think again. One thread represents what? Not a servlet. Okay, you're close to the answer, client. No, client's request, guys. Are you understanding? Okay, all again the numbers. 10 clients sending 5 requests each. So how many requests we have got altogether for a particular servlet? 50. Everyone get the number? So those requests are represented by threads. Okay, and 10 and 5 are very small numbers in a real scenario. You will have hundreds of clients sending maybe whatever, hundreds of requests concurrently. So I'm telling you a story, so follow along. So suppose I say 100 clients sending 100 requests each. So how many requests I'm talking about? Yeah, so 10,000 requests. So if you are okay, before I say any further thing, who is managing the threads? P or WC, programmer or web container? Who is managing this concurrency, web container? So If web container was using our earlier stuff, extended, implements, enable, our earlier understanding of multi-threading, meaning anytime client sends a request, suppose web container was creating a thread all over, a new thread, that thread in its run method was calling, suppose service, your whatever, HTTP servlet service, public service, protected service, do get, do post. And when the servicing is over, your run method is over, the task is over. So what happens when the run method is over? What happens to the thread when the run method is over? Thread becomes dead. Okay. If this was the model, a thread per request model, and creation of the thread and killing the thread for one request response. If you are talking about 100,000 or okay, 10,000, 100 into this, 10,000 requests, your entire bandwidth of the web container will be spent only in creating and killing the thread. Understood what I said? So 100% this doesn't happen. You don't see, you see web container giving you request object, response objects, managing session tracking, etc., etc. So there has to be something different which is happening. Agreed? Accepted? I'll repeat the previous statement. If you are genuinely, the web container was actually creating the thread after the request comes in and destroying the thread, as in killing the thread, this wouldn't have scaled up. This wouldn't scale up at all. So this is not what container does. Here instead, web container uses the executor framework. Okay. So I've written something here, but I'll share with you. Just a second. You just have the, actually you don't have, but yeah, at least overview, at least you should understand. So all of this will be collected and this. You have a weekend approaching, fortunately. So do give some time. Some time you spend on the, like whatever, finishing incomplete work and all, but do spend some time in reading also. So what is it I was wanting to give you this? Yeah. So I have sent you executor framework zip. And here, of course, I'm starting with the README. I'm just giving you overview. I'm not at all covering whole because at least I'll require 1 or 2 days to cover the executor framework if I decide to do it in a full manner justice, full justice. So start reading with me. I'll highlight. And you first read it. I'll explain. Connection exception. Connection exception doesn't exist. This one, Shubham, it is connect exception. Java.sql.connect exception is a checked exception. Okay, so coming back to the point, this executor framework is not a part of web program. Advanced Java. It is a program. It is a part of Java IC. You'll see there's a package java.util.concurrent for that. When was the support introduced? In Java 5. Okay, so here, what was the earlier support which we have done is we were in the earlier days means in core Java, we were creating a class extending thread implements enable, and then we were creating a thread class thread t1 equal to new thread, and then starting it and waiting for it, joining and all that. So who was managing the threads? Programmer. So now why executor framework? Do we want to handle the threads? We don't. Our web container is going to manage the threads, and that too using executor framework. So what is it? Read this. If you have the tasks, so tasks are what? Somebody had said tasks. So more clearly, the requests. Request servicing is a task. So if you have hundreds of clients sending concurrent requests, you got so many tasks, you have got so many requests to be executed. And if you are this thing, what was it? Web container was going the earlier way by creating the thread and killing it. Soon you will run, soon it would run out of its bandwidth because the maximum amount, the maximum time is required for creating a thread because you are starting a parallel flow of control and killing the thread. So executor framework 100% has a solution to this problem. So instead of creating the threads and killing it, what is the approach it takes? Reusability. Reusability is a part of it is so this thing. So what you do is in executor framework, how part will come to you in a minute. You can create, not you here, web container creates specified number of threads, fixed number of threads, and reuses the same number of threads to execute these tasks the moment the currently assigned task is over. So before I say anything, I'll ask you to refresh your memory of the first day of Advanced Java, where we had overridden init, destroy, and do get. And you remember we were saying SOP thread.current thread. Do you remember anything of it? Any of it? We were just printing which thread. So tell me, do you remember seeing the repetitive numbers also of the threads? There were thread 5, thread 6, thread 7, numbers were repeating. That itself tells you that the same same threads are getting reused. So why executor framework? Simplifies the whole business of managing threads largely. And the best part is you are not affected. You don't have to manage the threads. The executor framework does it. And still better news is executor framework also you don't have to learn. Web container has adopted it. Web container has used it. So little bit of background. So here, which is the package? Java util concurrent. What is the heart of, what is the base interface where it starts? Executor is the name of the interface. And it has got only one method, execute. And you know the argument already. What is the argument of execute method? Runnable task. So I have given some ready-made code samples also. So you can see that later. So all your job is supply a runnable task, which has, of course, a run method. Not in advanced Java. I'm talking about core Java. And executor framework will manage, attaching the task to the thread, starting the threads, joining, waiting for it. Everything will be managed by the executor service. Executor framework. So executor is the super interface. This is little bit, you bear with me. And the sub interface is executor service. Super interface, executor, sub interface, executor service. And it has got lot of methods. Later you can read core Java docs and you can find out Java util concurrent executor service. It has got submit style, execute, shutdown, lot of things it adds. Now let me come to the, I'm not explaining this. This is further sub interface. Our interest is executor service. So executor service is an interface, but there is a, what is it called? Helper class. Yeah, a utility class. Currently, don't worry about factory method. It gives you ready-made thread pool based executors. So I've already defined the factory method. You can later read. It is factory is what? A provider of executor service. And the now finally coming back to the point, I'm connecting it to our web container, which is the method or which type of the thread pool or which type of a executor service our web container uses is new fixed thread pool. So read that and I'll ask you a question. So anytime you say thread pool, I'm talking about new fixed thread pool. Any thread pool has two things. One is the queue where the tasks are going to be submitted or pushed, you can say. and one is the pool. So if I use new fixed thread pool, not I, container is using it, which of it is bounded? Which of it is fixed in size? Your choices are queue, pool, both, or neither. Answer is right there. The pool is fixed in size. Okay. Now related to our advanced Java. So here, okay, let me say this. When you launch, now what I'm saying is a little bit server specific. Other servers also have the similar implementation. Tomcat, whenever you are launching Tomcat, it uses server.xml. You remember? We configured the port number. We changed the port number from that server.xml connector tag. So there, default, what do you say? Default thread pool size is fixed. Supplied. So it ranges from 20 to 200. So in short, whenever the web server, whenever the Tomcat server starts, immediately the server side container, server side JVM, which is server side JVM? Web container starts. So web container, whenever it starts, guys, hear me. I'm not saying when the web application deploys. Web application deployment happens later. I'm talking about starting the server. So at the server startup type, who will create and what? Your web container will create a fixed size thread pool. So this thread pool have a lot of, lot of configuration things. So let me show you the diagrammatic way. So this is your thread pool executor. Okay. So this is your typically used. See, every server internally may use different things. Overall discussion I'm giving you. So take a look at thread pool. I've shared this diagram. Thread pool executor. What are the two things you are looking at here? This is the pool of threads. This is a thread pool and this is your task queue. So let us start and discuss it from power on to concurrency. So you tell me. Oh, sorry. Before I start asking you question, there are two configuration parameters. Core pool size, which is the minimum pool size, which is what is used to, to start. So it is 20, I guess. For Tomcat, it is 20. And then there is a maximum pool size to which the pool can grow. Okay, so numbers don't be after learning the numbers because they may vary from server to server. So as far as my diagram, whatever shared diagram, this is downloaded from net, is concerned, what is the core pool size which is shown in this diagram? And what is the max pool size? Give me two answers. 2 and 4. Okay. Of course, the reality, the numbers are too big, but for explanation, this is good. So now, when the Tomcat server starts, how many threads are sitting there? How many threads are already there waiting for the task? Answer is 2. Got me? Okay. So there are 2 threads sitting idle. But are these threads yet attached to any task? Absolutely not. So in the power on condition, when there are no clients who have yet connected, what about the task queue? Empty or non-empty? When the clients have not yet submitted any request, is this task queue empty or non-empty? 100% empty. The task is what? Request processing is the task I'm talking about. So what is the power on condition, guys? Power on means when the Tomcat server or any server is started, you have got a minimum, core pool size threads awaiting the task and the task queue is empty. Okay, start with that. Now let us say, it's all very logical, very, common sense driven. So client 1 sends the request. So when the client 1 sends a request, the requests are always put on the queue. But tell me, will it keep sitting in the queue or is there any thread free to service the request? It's a obvious answer. One is free. So now what will happen? Your executor framework, as in web container, will pull out the thread. This is a concept of a thread pool. Same concept I'll explain for connection pool in Hibernate. Anyway, so this thread is pulled out. It is attached the task. So this is where the thread is assigned the task. And which is the method of the thread? We typically have the servicing method run. But executor framework supports two interfaces. One is runnable, having run. Other one is callable, having call. So that is a detail. Let's say run method. Now anyone wants to tell me, what will that threads run method internally call? I've written it in the notes or whatever, but you tell me. Are you understanding? Any free thread is pulled out. It is attached to the task. It is attached with the task. And what then it starts calling run method. So what will run method call? Guess. What will be the business logic in the run method? This is your web programming. Servlet we are talking about. So which method? Directly do star method? Wrong. Okay. HTTP servlets public service method. Public service method will call which method? Protected service. And protected service will dispatch the request to do star methods. Understood me? Same flow. Only thing is now I'm introducing the threads. Otherwise, whole thing is the same. Got me? Now focus further. Now I'm saying your do star method returns. Your protected and public service method returns. In run method, that was the only task. Run method returns. So now apply the common sense and tell me, when such a threads run method returns, which of the following you think will happen? Your web container or that executor framework will kill the thread, or the pulled out thread will simply return to the pool so that it can be reused by some other client, some other request. Tell me, killing the thread or returning to the pool? Of course, it returns to the pool. So guys, with the lesser number of threads which are already created, I can cater, web container can service larger number of larger number of concurrency. Okay, so this was the story for first request. One client request. Now take it ahead. So imagine, you have to imagine it's a story. So suppose T1 is out here servicing the client 1's request. Concurrently, C2 comes in. Tell me, will client 2 get blocked? You tell me what will happen. Will it find any blocking? Of course not. There is another thread, T2 core pool size. So T2 will be out servicing the client 2's task. Everyone understanding it so far? So what is the picture now? The picture is both the threads are out servicing client 1 and client 2's request. Clear? Now, concurrently, third client comes in. You get me? So now tell me, what do you think will happen? Blocking or no blocking? I got the answer as blocking. One answer only. What about others? What are others doing? Why one answer? What will it happen? Blocking or no blocking? Answer is no blocking. Guys, here you have just exhausted the core pool size. But have we yet reached the maximum pool size? No. So your web container will pump in, will add more threads. Okay, so it will add the third thread. Let's say T1, T2, T3, some numbers. So T3 will be added because I have not hit the maximum limit yet. And T3 will be busy outside the pool servicing C3. Visualizing this. And likewise, C4 also. Okay, so what will happen to C4? Again, my max pool size is suppose 4. So now I have got T1 servicing C1, T2 C2, T3 C3, T4 C4. All threads are out servicing earlier 4 requests. Understood so far? Because if you ask me to repeat, I can't repeat the whole thing. So I'm asking you. Yeah, it's not yet. See, everything enters in the queue. Ankit, you're wrong. Everything is going via the queue, but that queue is not, it's not getting blocked. The tasks are getting pulled out from the threads immediately. And currently also the queue is all empty. So the tasks are always queued up, but the moment the thread is what? Idle, the thread pulls out the tasks from the queue. Okay. Now imagine that C5, the 5th thread. I'm just playing with small numbers. So what is the current picture? All threads are busy servicing their request and the fifth client comes in. Now tell me, blocking or no blocking? Yes. So now that this thing, Ankit, whatever you are saying, so all the threads were, all the tasks were pushed. This is your first in, first out. Simple task queue. So now C5's task will be queued. And is this task queue bounded or unbounded? Fixed in size or growable? Completely growable. Are you getting me? So more and more tasks can be pushed onto the queue. And if there are tasks, if the thread, suppose if you add thread dot sleep, a huge sleep in the do get do post method, the threads do not return control, and then somewhere you can see the server timeout and you get the message that server is busy, try after some time. So the point of making you understand all this was, this is a thread pool based executor framework where there are multiple threads already created and waiting in the pool to be attached to the tasks. Anytime client sends the request, simply the task is attached. The thread pulls out the task from the queue and starts executing. And the moment its execution is over, thread does not become dead at all. Thread simply pulls in, and then it can pick up the next task on the queue. So that the point is important. Even if I have 100 clients sending 100 requests each, will I require 10,000 threads, or can I manage with the lesser number of threads? Will I require one single thread per task? Per request? Of course not. So this reusability is the heart of executor framework. Understood slightly at least what we are talking about, the queue and the thread pool. Okay, so now let me take you like I said, it's a huge topic. Oh, what is it I'm doing? I was closing everything other than this. Wait a second. Yeah. So let me open that. Where are we? Yeah, so let me, okay, I was saying something I forgot here. So I have given the actual code also, steps and all that. Okay, so runnable, I'm starting with runnable, and then I'm telling you what are the limitation of runnable and what is a better API callable, which has a future and something like your promise, you have a future, and all those things are mentioned here. So you can go through it, and here it's an additional thing. It is not in your contents. And I've also given you the example of one with a runnable scenario and one with a callable. But the idea to get you back on track is executor framework is being used by the web container transparently. So you just have to understand the overview of executor framework. But anytime you want to dig deeper, the code and the readmes are all provided. So now if we continue our discussion of the life cycle, now we are almost done. Almost done means this part is also discussed. So tell me, who is going to create, come back to advanced Java, web programming in Java. So who is going to create this thread pool? Web container. When? At the web container startup. Using which framework? Executor framework. Okay, so already you have got a thread pool and the empty queue, which is created. Now, let us say client is sending the request. So web container doesn't have to invest time in creating a new thread. It will simply pull out any available, a free idle thread from the pool, and the task will be attached. So which task? So let us say runnable. It can be run or call, but I'm saying run because you know run. So it will call run. Run is having the public service method, which calls the protected service method, and finally dispatches it to do get do post, 2-star methods. So this is where we have been writing the business logic, servicing logic for last 4 days. After the do-star method returns, its invoker service returns, run method returns. But the big difference between our earlier discussion and this discussion is the thread is not killed. The thread doesn't become dead. the pulled out thread, which was like swapped out from the pool, simply returns to the pool, so that the very same thread can be reused to service any client's any request. So that with the lesser number of threads, your web container can handle the concurrency, can handle the larger, what you say, larger concurrency pressures. It gives you the scalability to the entire web application. Understood something? Okay. So here I'm not spending here your 2 minutes till you read the readme, that you are supposed to do in the extra time. So here now, so this is called as the servicing phase, which is where your servlet will spend maximum amount of time. Guys, servlets follow a persistent life cycle, meaning once the servlet instance is created and put on the heap, initialized and all that, the same servlet instance can handle the services, can handle the requests from multiple clients. You have seen all that. This is your threaded architecture or multi-threaded architecture. Now let us come to the end of the life cycle. So at the end of the servlet life cycle, having 3 triggers. So which triggers are we talking about? Shutting down the server, undeploy a web application, or redeploy a web application. In either of the cases, will container directly go for garbage collection of the servlet instance? Never. So web container will invoke the destroy method. If you have any cleanup related jobs, like we had dow.cleanup, we will override the destroy. Otherwise, we have inherited the generic servlets destroy method, which is kind of do nothing. And after that destroy method is called, then it will mark the servlet instance for garbage collection, ending the servlet lifecycle. So this is your servlet lifecycle in complete detail, including the 2 facts which were not discussed earlier, executor framework and servlet config. So definitely go through that through the flowchart. And for executor framework, I've already given you the separate readmes. Go through that. At least read the relevant part, the first half of it. The steps and the programming steps, I don't expect you to read. If you read, you can, of course. But the part where I'm discussing the working, the diagram and the Hive executor framework, definitely go through. So this was another pending topic, complete servlet lifecycle. Understood at least 20-30%? It is very interesting. Absolutely. That is what makes the whole web programming so interesting. And okay, since I got a comment, such comments, quite interesting and all, are always encouraging to the faculty. You should show interest, and then faculty, not just me, anyone feels like telling you more. So guys, this is as far as, what is it called? Non-reactive programming is concerned. But reactive programming, which is asynchronous programming, is another different ballgame, where it does not even use thread pool and does something. So I can't take it, because reactive programming in Java or any JS or whatever is a separate topic, which involves, at least a week or whatever I mean. So just understand that what I discussed just now is not a reactive programming, asynchronous event-based programming. This is a thread pool-based executor framework. You can definitely look for reactive programming in Java, which uses the thread concept in a totally different manner. Okay, it is analogy is event loop. Have you done the JavaScript event loop? Are you aware of a single event loop in the working of internals of JavaScript? So reactive programming takes it closer to that. Anyway, so what I discussed was how your Tomcat-like web server manages the lifecycle in a non-reactive environment. So this was just to give you some idea. Now, we have talked about scopes. So I'll just tell you something. Wait a second, I'm just checking. Yeah. So what I would like to do is, I have shown you the different scopes. Oh, sorry. Let me take the connected topic. I mean, connected to servlet lifecycle. 2 seconds here. I've not shared you this diagram, but I mean, you can watch this from here. Anyway, I'm going to share it later. What I'm discussing is only exam objective. So see, I always tell you, this is your lab objective or, project objective, interview objective, likewise. So this is just an exam objective. Servlet is not the only technology to create a web application. You know that. So there is another one, CGI. Anyone knows what CGI stands for? Have you heard of it? Is the basic thing in your this thing. What is it? Common Gateway Interface. Okay. So much before servlets were around or Java technologies were around, we had CGI. There are still installations of CGI based web server. So people, I mean, there is a often comparison asked, exam question only. CGI was web server versus servlet based. So understand the CGI based web server. So suppose you have a web server which is not J2E compliant, CGI compliant, and client sends a request. So imagine CGI1 is for login, CGI2 is for registration, typical login registration. Now start. So here, when any request comes, is it a thread-based web server or is it a process-based web server? There is an answer right there. What is it? It is using processes. So tell me, which one is the heavyweight context switching? Process-based context switching is heavyweight or thread-based context switching? Process-based. I hope you remember the entire. It doesn't share any common address space, nothing. So what it used to do is, it used to fork a new process, handle the request, and when the response is sent, the process used to die. I mean, the process used to be killed and the response used to be sent back. Story over. Now, suppose another client wants to register, new registration. So same story, a new process is spawned, created, it does the servicing, response is sent, process is dead. So far, I would say so good. I mean, okay kind of thing. But now, if another client wants to log in, so tell me, do you have that login process in the what you say, in the web server, or does it have to create a new process all over? New process or existing process? You can see a new process all over, and this used to happen every time. So anytime a request comes in to CGI-based web server, a new process was launched, and the moment response was rendered, the process is killed. So from that come to our servlet based. Servlet engine is equal to nothing but servlet container is equal to web container. So same story. Servlet 1, let's say login servlet. Servlet 2, let's say registration servlet. Okay, start. So suppose they are not loaded on startup. So a first request for servlet 1 comes. Now you know the whole story. Your executor framework, I mean web container, pulls out a thread. That pulled out thread will first locate, load, instantiate the servlet and call the service method. And when the servicing is over, tell me what will happen. I'll repeat my question. I said, when the servicing of that login request is over, which of the following will happen? Always options. First option, servlet instances destroyed, revoked, removed from the heap. Option 1. The thread which was calling this servlet dies. Anything else? Yeah, both of above, none of above. First option, come on guys. Does the servlet instance is revoked immediately after its response is rendered, or the same servlet instance keeps servicing all the services? How can you give me such a wrong answer after spending 4 days in servlet? I've showed you the in constructor in init just gets called once, whatever number of requests you have. So all are wrong. Only 1 or 2 I think said neither. Answer is neither. I'll repeat the question and the answer. You gave me a shock. Here, when the client sends a request, a thread is pulled out, and then servlet instance, suppose it was not created, will get created. So I just asked you, when the response is committed, response is rendered, what will happen? Is servlet instance destroyed? Absolutely not. Why should it destroy the servlet instance when the same instance can be used to share, to service some other client? And is the thread dead? Of course not. Pulled out thread simply returns to the pool. Now the next one, let's say registration servlet, same story happens. Login servlet and registration servlet are separate. So servlet 2 instances created, kept in the heap in a persistent manner. Now tell me, now please don't shock, don't disappoint. If now some other user, some other client performs the login. So start, tell me with thinking, will your web container have to create a new thread, or will it simply pull out the existing thread? New or pulled out thread? New or existing? Of course, existing thread. And that existing thread will create the servlet instance all over? Yes or no? I'm worried. Of course not. Will it say locate, load, instantiate and init, or will it directly proceed to servicing? Of course, it will directly proceed to servicing. So only the first request involved all of that. Second request onwards, it is such a lightweight life cycle, directly goes to servicing. And the moment servicing is done, you know what happens. Servlet instance is unaffected. It is still kept on the heap. The thread which was calling it returns to the pool, rendering the response. So, obvious question, which will be faster? CGI based servicing will be faster, or servlet based servicing will be faster? Obviously, servlet based servicing will be faster. Okay. So like I said, just keep it as an exam objective. Are you really going to use CGI? I mean, I don't think so. At least not in Java technologies. So this was one comparison I wanted to show you. Now little bit about the context. I talked about servlet config. See, today is the like a wrap up for the servlet, largely conceptual. So this thing, I'll open the slide which I had already shared earlier. Tell me, out of these 4 scopes, this is the scopes of the attributes. There are 4 scopes only. Throughout web programming, you are going to hear from me only 4 scopes: page, request, session, application. So answer that. Which scopes we have used and where? Tell me the scope name and the use case. Waiting for your answer. Yeah, request and session, Avinash, you are right. But tell me the use cases. Request scope, when, and yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, in the client pool, session scope, and in the server pool, request scope. You got me all right? I mean, everyone understands it, I hope. But other than that, while we are in the servlet, in JSPs, I'll introduce you to page scope. I told you that. But while we are in the servlet, are we having a widest scope? Do we have the additional scope? Answer is yes. And that is your entire web application scope. Or that is nothing but your servlet context. Okay. So let me say this properly. Because people ask you, servlet config versus servlet context. So I'm just going to discuss it, and in JSP, I'll generally take all these examples. So here on, you already told me the use case of servlet request scope is server pool, request dispatchers, forward, as well as include. This is for client pool. So now I'm giving you the situation. Situation means scenario. Suppose you are developing a banking web application, and banks come out with different schemes all the time, different advertisements all the time. For example, there is a loan scheme. For example, there is a pension scheme, to attract the customers. So listen to the question. I, as a web application developer, that banking software, I want to store this, loan scheme information. I want to store the details of loan scheme. What is the period? What is the EMI? What are the benefits you get? All this information I want to store. So this information is what? Server side class. I'll have a class loan scheme. So we'll have objects, attributes. Server side objects is equal to attributes. So the question being asked is, if I keep, okay, you tell me, which is the suitable scope? I mean, what is the perfect scope where I should store this loan scheme information? You have only three choices: request, session, or context. Either way, I'm going to ask you why. Which is the best suitable scope where to store this loan scheme information? RSA, request, session, or application. Siddharth has answered request. So, guys, tell me. I am getting all possible answers. People are just taking, I think, random guesses, looks like. Okay, I'll solve it one by one. Okay, so some of you told me request scope. Fine. So if I save the loan scheme as a request scope attribute, and if I have 10 clients sending 5 requests each, how many copies of loan scheme would be there? Tell me the number. Request scope attribute, how many copies it will end up creating? 5 copies is the wrong answer. 10 clients sending 5 requests each. 50 is the correct answer. Guys, request scope attribute 1 per request. So 50 copies. But do you want so many copies? Okay, let me rephrase it. Loan scheme is the information. Is it specific to a particular request? Is it specific for a particular client, or is it specific to a particular banking web application? Answer that. Of course, it is the common information. Guys, for example, you have ICICI, net banking, HDFC. The first thing you see before you log in, any customer sees the same advertisement. So what is this information? If you save this information, which was horribly wrong answer by the way, request, you are wasting the resources. Unnecessarily, you will be keeping multiple copies, 1 per request, completely bad choice. If you say, I want to store it, you store it in a session. So I'll ask you the same question. 10 clients sending 5 requests each. How many copies of that loan schemes would be done? Don't disappoint. Correct answer. So 10 copies. But I'm saying, isn't it still wasteful? Because I just want to share one piece of information across all the customers. So tell me, is request scope correct one? Grossly wrong. Session, still wrong. So is there any interface which can represent the entire web application? Answer is yes. And that is your servlet context. So the best part of J2 is concept could be little involved, but the APIs are easy. So tell me, if you are using server pool, how we were setting the attributes? Request.set attribute. In client pool, how we were setting the attributes? Session.set attribute. When I want a global scope, entire web application scope, how will I save the attributes? There is a getter, get servlet context dot which method? Any new method or the same method? New or same method. Common block APIs. And once you say context or get servlet context dot set attribute, read this carefully. So how many copies of context scope attributes will be created? 1 per request, 1 per client, or 1 per application? 1 per entire web application. So one single copy will be shared across all the web pages from the same web application for any client. Let me have C1, C2, C3, C100. All of them will be sharing the same copy. But now think about thread safety. Suppose I have got one object, one shared resource, and I can read and write because I can have set attribute. It's an object. I can change the state of the object. So it is a readable, writable object. So go back to core Java, threads topic. When you have one single shared resource shared across multiple threads, and some are reading and some are writing, do you need to apply the thread safety? Of course, yes. So which is the keyword we had learned in core Java for applying synchronization? Synchronized. Which were the two different techniques you know from synchronization? Synchronized keyword can be applied at which two levels? A method or a block, right? So if you say, for example, see, always think in code and put it together. I closed it by mistake. So just open your any of the method, such as, do, get, do, post type. Give me a second. So suppose if you take the synchronized method approach, okay. So for example, login servlet. And here, if you just add a keyword here, synchronized, what is the meaning of this synchronized method? Any thread will have to acquire the lock is equal to enter the monitor anytime it is calling this servicing method. So think and answer. In web programming, synchronized method, is it a good solution or is it a bad solution? Good or bad? 100% bad solution. Why? Because you are synchronizing entire servicing logic. Means you are killing the concurrency and your application will fail to be scalable. All the clients will get blocked because because the monitor is simply not free. So instead of applying the synchronized method, I discussed all this in our core Java days. So instead of that, what you should do is identify the critical section. Which critical section? Whichever is working on this context scope attributes, and wrap it in a synchronized block. Are you understanding? So I take this example, but in JSP, because already we have spent too much. Yes, prone to race condition, absolutely. But and which threads are we talking about? These threads are nothing but the different client requests coming concurrently to you. So coming back to the point, read this twice. Since your context scope attribute, only one copy is going to be created in the entire web application, shared across multiple threads representing multiple requests. So that is why they are inherently thread safe. And anytime I show you the example of a context scope attribute, which I generally do in JSP, you will have to access it in a there's no inherent thread safety. So you'll have to apply the thread safety using preferably synchronized blocks. So this is some background about context or servlet context. And here you have got a lot of readmes today to go through as a preparation of your interviews and exams and all. So here is the servlet context. So read this. I'm just checking. Yeah, you can read this much. The favorite question is servlet config versus servlet context. Okay, so let me start reading it line by line. What is servlet context? An interface. 90% of it is interface specifications. Which package? Javax.servlet. Now, who is going to create the object of servlet context? 90% of answer of who is web container. But when? That is when web application is equal to web context represented by servlet context. So who is going to create this servlet context object? and when container at the web application deployment time. So let me just ask you in numbers. You understand very clearly things in numbers. So suppose on our Tomcat server, we have deployed, today is what, day 6. Okay, so let's say something. Suppose 3 web applications have deployed. Let's say banking, e-shop, and CMS. So how many these things? How many servlet context objects you expect to see in the heap? 1 or 3? Of course, 3. Is everyone clear with the numbers? So one web application represented by servlet context interface, servlet context object, implementation class in the Catalina jar, as always. Now, but there's a small catch there. When you call, okay, how will you get access to this servlet context? There is a method, get servlet context. But when you call this get servlet context method, internally it uses get servlet config, and that internally, that is how the call is done. So that is why I've written servlet context object is wrapped within a servlet config. And then the moment I see this, read this note in a careful manner and answer me. Will you be able to access servlet context? I said servlet context object from, your choices are default constructor of servlet, init method, either of above, any of above, neither of above. Tell me. Answer is init method onwards. Because guys, this can be confusing. Servlet context gets created right at the application deployment time. But will you be able to access it till initialization? Answer is no. And how many instances? As already said, 1 per entire web application. And then there are so many usages. If you want to do the server-side logging, you have a context. You say get servlet context.log, and you can do the logging of the messages. If I want to create one copy of an attribute shared across all the customers, all the clients, which is the scope we are going to use? Context scope. Context is equal to application scope, and which is the method which I discussed earlier. Get servlet context get it, and context.set attribute string comma object. Are they inherently thread safe or thread unsafe? Highly thread unsafe. One copy shared across multiple threads. So apply thread safety using synchronized method or synchronized block. Synchronized blocks. Okay. Next thing. Just earlier, I talked about servlet specific initialization parameters. So I said servlet specific init parameters. So if you want to read servlet specific init parameters, tell me, what will you use? Config or context? I know it is all confusing, so I'm giving you repeating the revision part. I'll repeat the question. I want to read those database related things, you remember? Servlet specific initialization parameters. Are you going to use them using config or context? Abhijit, you're wrong. Config, servlet specific configuration, servlet config is the correct answer. You got me? But now, okay, let me say this. If you declare in S1 or in login servlet, a servlet config parameter, init parameter, will it be accessible only to login servlet or to all the pages? Private or public? Servlet config parameter, of course, only to login, private to that servlet. So now I'm giving you the opposite thing. If you want to add some global parameters, I'm saying parameters, I'm not talking attribute. So when I say middle of night, parameter, string comma string or string comma object, string comma string. Read only or readable, writable, parameter, read only. Inherently thread safe or thread unsafe, thread safe. Keep such things in front of you. I'm telling you, you will fare well in any question answer, interviews and all that. The moment I say attribute, it is readable, writable. So if I want to share, let's say some common parameters, I mean, some global parameters across all the web pages from my web application, will you store it under servlet config? Or I mean, what will you use? Config or context? Of course, a context. And what is the tag? There is no annotation, right? Just guys, give me a second. I need to just give me a minute, please. I'm so sorry. So I was asking you, or rather I was telling you, if you want to have a global parameter, global as in what? I don't want to restrict it only to a particular servlet. I want to share it across all the web pages, but from the same web application. Of course, we will use the context is equal to web application, and which is the tag to store it. Earlier, I had discussed init param tag, which was embedded in the servlet. So now we are going to use a context param tag. And here, what you have is the inner tags are the same, child tags are the same, parameter name and parameter value. So tell me, who all will be able to access these context parameters? A particular servlet or all the web pages from a particular application? Everyone is getting it? So that is your context parameter. So this is where you have added them. But how do you access these parameters in a servlet? Can be accessed init onwards, and steps are almost the same. So what you do is, instead of saying get servlet config, now you say get servlet context. So servlet config represents servlet specific configuration. Servlet context represents your entire web application. And thankfully, API is the same, method is the same. So once you get a servlet context, which is the method, get servlet context, for example, the method name is the same, get init parameter, in goes the context parameter name, and out comes the value. So whether it is a servlet config API, which works on a particular servlet, or whether it is a servlet context API, methods are the same, working is the same. So this was to give you all this what I discussed in last whatever time is all exam objective, interview objective and all that. You should know about this. But if you don't use it practically, you don't understand too much. So let me see. I hope I have got some ready-made demo. Just a second now. So demo of config versus context. Okay. So let me just check. I'll give you the instructions. What is it I changed? I don't remember. Anyway. So just 2 minutes. We have 4.2, we have 4.2. Guys, follow the instructions. I'm asking you to copy. I will give you 10 minutes break. And when we resume, we will see it. And you will have a clear-cut understanding of config versus context. Okay. So check your workspace. Do you have any project by the name day 4.2? Because I'm going to give you a ready-made project whose name is also day 4.2. You have it? Okay. So refactor. Because ID will never allow you to have the same project. Okay. So please refactor it. Right click. refactor, rename. You can say day 4.2 original. Because I'm going to give you something which has the same. Okay, so I hope you have refactored it. Let me create. I've not tested it recently, very honestly. We will do it together. Add to work. I'll give you this. And I'll send you this on chat. What does it? So tell me when you got it, when you receive it. You just extract and you're going to import it in our workspace. Got it, guys? So you can just go to your workspace, file. Everyone here, can I continue to import? It is an older project, so we might have to change some things. So do it with me. Those who are coding along, please do it with me. So file. I have not refactored it as per the latest versions. That's why I'm saying existing projects in the workspace and all that is the same. And here, I'll offer you some troubleshooting tips. Don't worry. And here, I just went to the folder and I can see D4.2. You can say copy projects into workspace. Reach here, nothing different. This is not different. We may have to follow some troubleshooting tips. We'll see. And simply say finish. So did your day 4.2 got did it get imported with a red cross? Okay. So you can see there is a red cross here. So this anyway, I wanted to show you sometimes the troubleshooting tips and all that. So this is my chance. So right click on it. Right click on newly added. Actually, what we will do is we will refactor into day 6.4 so that, it will be all consistent. Right click, refactor. Let me rename it as. Otherwise, while sharing, even I might forget to do this. So day 6.4, that doesn't remove that red cross, and just change this to 6.4. Oh, it has been. The moment you refactor, it changes the context path. So have you refactored it, renamed it from 4.2 to 6.4? Which recap, Abhijit? When you say recap, I don't know what you're talking about. Importing. Oh, importing. File. I'll tell you, there's no recap. I'll give you the instructions. File. Import existing projects in the workspace. And then, I don't know where you have extracted it. Just give the folder name. Press enter. And select that checkbox. Copy project into workspace. And it will be done. Or you can do it. Anyway, I'm giving you 10 minutes break. So you can try it in the break. Okay, so I just want to fix those red crosses before we take a break. Now, so here, right click on the project and say build path, configure build path. And observe, guys, you have to do, see, in the projects phase and all, of course, some of us will be around, but you have to finally manage on your own. So tell me, are you seeing anything? Okay, click on the third tab, libraries. Are you seeing anything unbound or nothing is unbound? Are you seeing anything unbound? Yes or no? Which is unbound? Don't say 3 and all. You can read this much. Apache. So this was ported or rather deployed on the earlier one. So click on this. Okay. Simple instructions. Can you see the edit button here? And which runtime are you going to choose? VMware TC or Apache Tomcat 9.0? Of course, Apache Tomcat 9.0. We are not using VMware Tomcat server yet. Say finish. And please check, is the JDK proper? JDK 11, whatever may be the update version. Don't go to server library. You don't require server library. Just edit it. Okay. So this looks all fine. And then say apply and close. And right click and say refresh. Still the error has not disappeared. So in such case, it will work. 100%, I mean 100% I can't say, but yeah, generally it will work. But if you want to find out, there is a problems tab. So what you can do is here, we'll see finally there will be a facet issue and all. Is Red Cross still there or is Red Cross gone? Red Cross still there. So before I make any statement, let me just run it and check whether it is running, and then we'll take care of those facet issues. So next, oh, oh, there is no server. I know this. Okay, as good I ran it. So now I'll give you the further instruction. Here, it has not yet assigned the proper Tomcat. This, right click on it, please. It did not run, so I'm giving you the instruction. I should have fixed it, first and given you. But it doesn't matter. You learn a lot along with. Click on targeted runtimes. Can you see? Under service policies, there is a targeted runtimes. Found it? It must have selected the checkbox of 8.5. We don't use 8.5. That's older. Choose the 9.0. Done? Found it or not? Targeted runtime means which this thing you are using, Tomcat. So this one, and apply and close. Yeah. Now I mean in my case at least the error is gone. Is it gone? Red cross is gone. Okay. So let's try to run it. And the understanding part and the solving part will do after the 10 minutes break. But I'm just ensuring whether our project is running or not. Remove all. The all your eyes should be on the, yeah, looks fine. Server side console. Yeah. So this is your altered one. I'll send you in case anyone is finding it hard. Let me make a zip of it. The latest one, which is now upgraded to Tomcat 9.0 and all. If you are managing on your own, very good, excellent. I mean, you don't take this then. But in case anyone is having problem, please don't waste your time. Yeah. So I have sent you the upgraded one. So here we are taking break for 10 minutes. And then we are going to look at it and you will understand immediately. It is a small, simple demo to tell you what is the difference between servlet config versus servlet context. We'll solve it in after 10 minutes break. So see you around. Project of context versus config. Can I start with the explanation, discussion? Are we ready to go? Okay. So right now you just stop the server. I want to first show you things and then we will of course observe and conclude. So you can stop the server here. Control Shift W, close everything. Open day 6.4 and here web content, web.inf. Okay, there is a web.xml. Please open web content, web.inf, web.xml. Everyone open web.xml. Tell me, have I configured any servlets there? Are there any servlets which are configured there? Answer is yes. So which servlet we have configured? I think people know this about it. Servlet 1. Can you see this? So I'll highlight this part. Okay. So always look at it from the in the bottoms up manner. So which is the URL pattern? /s1. Which is the name of the servlet? Anything, including ABC. Is it going to be loaded on the startup right at the application deployment time? Eagerly, yes. And I've just given a, some configuration value. Initialization parameter name test1 and the value 1, 2, 3, 4. Understood the tags? We have done this, guys, earlier. You spend a lot of time in that. Everyone clear? So let me ask you, when will container start the life cycle of your servlet 1? After the first request or application deployment time? Application deployment time. Will it have, does it have any in a servlet specific initialization parameter? Answer is yes. What is the name of that servlet specific init parameter? Test1. So now the final question. The moment you have declared it inside this servlet tag, this particular test1, will it be available only to servlet 1 or any page from the entire web application? Is it private to servlet 1 or any page? Of course, private to servlet 1. You got it? So this is about your servlet tag, servlet and a servlet mapping. Now come down and you will see another latest discussed tag, context parameter, context param. So don't confuse. You have seen 3 different type of parameters so far. One is request parameter, which client sends it to you in the either request body or query string, and you read it using request.get parameter. Story over. Second one is servlet specific init parameter, which you read it using config, using servlet config. Now I'm asking you about the third one. This is a whole discussion is config versus context. So tell me, these context parameters, are they accessible only to a servlet 1 or any other page in the entire web application? Private or global, all, any page in the web application. So keep remembering that. And like I said, it's just a demo. So I have created that as a test 2 and this thing, parameter value 5678. Is the web.xml clear? So as a recap, you have got one servlet specific init parameter test1, one context parameter test2. Clear or not clear with the web.xml? You jot down the points because I'm going to ask you questions soon. So now you open my servlet. This was a old project, so it doesn't have that src main Java. This are deployed earlier 8.5. So you'll have I'll give you day 6.4 src pages, and please open servlet 1. I'll give you a minute to read through this. It's not a big servlet at all. Just go through it. I'll start asking you questions. All I'm asking you is what will be the output and etc. etc. Okay. You might be still reading it. Looking at time, I'll just take it parallelly. Which are the 2 different ways to supply the deployment instructions to the container? How do you give the deployment instructions to the container? XML or annotation? So just to give you all possible information, I had shown you with the XML, and this is your example of annotation. So I'm not saying please don't uncomment it. You can't have it both ways. Best way to supply the init parameters is through XML. I explained that. But in case you want, you can have your value or URL patterns. So this is your slash URL path, slash S1. And I discussed it earlier. There is an attribute called as init params. And same thing which I showed you with XML can be done here. But since we want to typically externalize, keep it outside the Java code, typically when we are passing the parameters, we use the XML option. But in case you want, what is that corresponding way? So the example. So currently kept it commented. Now tell me, is this, okay, let me phrase the question. When will this init method get called? At the application deployment time or this thing after the first request? You don't go by memory. You go by this. Of course, deployment time. It's eager. So now start answering my questions. Okay, before that, let's make it interesting. I'm just thinking whether to show it now or later. Let's do it now. Please add a constructor here. Okay. And add some SOP here. I have made so many statements today, guys, because it was like a wrap up of the servlet. So in default constructor, so you are going to spend the lab session in revising all of it. So in default constructor, and I'm saying here, get servlet config. Okay, I'll just give a header here. You know the answer. So what is the expected output here? Quickly, we have done this earlier. In default constructor, what is the value you expect to see? 100% null. You got it? And this is, all these are like, popular understanding related. In default constructor, okay, I don't have to write this. And now I want to print the context. So which is the method to get the servlet context? The method name itself is get servlet context. Okay, so this is the method. But read more. All answers, whatever I'm saying is already given. I have taken it from Java docs. So returns a reference to servlet context in which this servlet is running. And what it internally calls is servlet config.get servlet context. So let me ask you, what will happen if I write it this way? What do you think will happen? What will be the output here? Null or not null? Absolutely right. You are very right. All you will get is a NPE, null pointer exception. Guys, your servlet config is null. And when you call any method on a null, what do you get? Null pointer. So if you are not thought so deep, you might say that servlet context object gets created right at the application deployment time. So I should get it. But that was that note about when I highlighted your attention to this here. When I said read this, this is what I meant. Servlet context object is accessible from within servlet config. So unless until servlet config is created, how can you access it? So 100% you are going to get null pointer. You know, it's good to see. Now, you can add, see, this is all about like almost finishing with servlets. So why don't you add a parameterized constructor? Like I said, I keep making statements. So of course, better to prove. So let's say servlet one. I'm not getting the, what do you say? Auto completion. So I'll just add, and I'm just adding some constructor, string message, anything. And you tell me in parameterized. Guys, all of whatever I did today is extremely good for your interview question. Exam objectives, interviews and all. Practical part of it was that passing those parameters and making that application database independent in a parameterized constructor. So please tell me, Will you ever see this message? Will your container ever call the parameterized constructor? Answer is no. So this won't be, will not be invoked. Will confirm. All this is about confirmation. Okay. So now, so here, I'm just making you aware of the things. So here, now I have got that get servlet config. So by this time I reach, of course, I'm going to get a null pointer. So that forget, we'll comment it later. If I comment this, then will the control reach here? Yes, get servlet config. And now the real question, I mean, not real and real, but yes, some questions begin. So here, what is the answer you expect to see? In init of S1, init parameter, SC means servlet config.get init parameter test1. So what do you expect to see? Null pointer exception, null value, blank value, or the whatever? Of course, you'll get the value as answer 1, 2, 3, 4. After you make earlier errors disappear. And now the next one. Null, not null, blank, non-blank, whatever. You will definitely get it. Because guys, here servlet 1. Servlet 1 can access its own initialization parameters 100%. But can it also access the global parameters 200%? Okay, so both you will see. And then I'm not doing. Okay, so I've kept this as a blank. I mean, what do you say? The default one. So you can see that. What does this response.getWriter returns? You know all about it. What does response.getWriter? Print writer. And print writer has, this is the ready-made stuff generated. I have not typed it. Appends, served at. So append means you're appending to the buffer of a print writer. And so served at will be printed. And anyone wants to guess? Okay, don't guess. Take the cursor here. I'm making your life easier. When you say get context path, which is the context we are working in currently, context is a web application. So context path is what? /day 6.4. So get request.get context path will simply return the path after that URI, the URI beginning / whatever day 6.4, and it will append the servlet name as S1. Understood this generated code? Okay, yes. So this is it. So this is about servlet 1. Now spend a minute in servlet 2 also. Yeah, take a look at it. Is it deployed using annotations or XML tag? Basic question. Of course, annotation. Lazy or eager? What is a loading policy here? Lazy, because I've never mentioned that. We just now revise that. So after the client sends the first request by clicking on some links and all that, what will be the life cycle? Initialization sequence is the same. Locate, load, instantiate. Servlet config will be added, and then the init method will be called. So I've got this. So start answering. So I have tried to access the servlet config. And here, what will be the output? Tell me. I'm trying to access sc.getInit parameter test1. This is what tells me your understanding. So just take the cursor here. Returns the initialization parameter name or null if the initialization parameter doesn't exist. Null or not null. 100% null. So what will it tell you? The initialization parameters which you access through the servlet config are specific to the servlet. That is what I've said maybe 10 times already. So whatever you have got in servlet 1, will you be able to share it with servlet 2? Yes or no? 100% not. That is your config part. Now I'm trying to get the servlet context and I'm trying to read this. So tell me, null or not null? Not null. And I already got the answer. Very good. I think Abhay, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this makes the understanding so easy. Always my approach has been, or my advice has been, instead of reading the pages and feeling sleepy and bored and lost and confused, run few examples and observe and conclude. So this will tell you the context parameters are shared across all the pages within a web application, whereas servlet init parameters are servlet specific, meant for a particular servlet. And this stub is the same. So it will just tell you served at whatever slash day 6.4 and S2. Is the code of both the servlets clear? Understood this? And now if you see my index page, in index page, I've just I've just got a link which will send a request to S1, which is already what initialized. So only the do get type of method will get called, and this is lazily deployed. Lazily loaded. So you'll see all of it. Okay. So now now deploy. Right click, run as run on server. Next and finish. And as always, all answers are on the console. Do not come to the client browser without visiting the console. That can kill you. That will definitely kill you sooner or later. So tell me, exception or no exception? 100% you will get an exception. Which exception are you getting? I'm getting NP. You are getting also? Yes. And our answer is so obvious. First of all, which constructor has been called default or parameterized? Default. What is the value of the config there? Null. So whenever I tried to say get servlet context, it was internally calling get servlet config dot get servlet context. And since servlet config was null, of course you got a null pointer. Okay. And it tells you, so this is not our class. So leave it. This is our class. So click on it and you will see this is the line which has thrown us null pointer. Understood all the statements I had made earlier regarding config and context? Okay. So guys, do spend. I'm not giving any new assignments today because I know you have a lot to revise. How can I do that? So I won't. So the point is, do take time. I'll give you a detailed lab instructions. Please follow it. Follow them. So coming back, now I can't do anything else before I comment this. So please comment, save. And let's see whether it is reloading. I think it has reloaded the context. I don't know really. Anyway, let's not take the chance. So go to the servers and I'll simply say restart. So when I say start here, when I click on the start button again, it is restarting the server all fresh, not leaving any ambiguity. So now take a look at the console and tell me null pointer exception, any exception or no exception? Answer is no exception. We have removed that error cause. So here, of course, config is null, but we never call the context. So that is all fine. And is servlet able to read its own servlet specific init parameter? Yes. Was it able to read the context parameter, which is like shared across all the pages? Yes, again. And whose life cycle? Okay, scratch that question. How many servlet instances are created and sitting in the heap so far? Only one. All clear? Everything making sense? Okay. So because the other one has not started the life cycle at all. Now go over to the client side. So I think just hover the cursor, /S1. So you can click on this and nothing fancy. This is your default message. Served at which context path? /day 6.4 with servlet S1. So fine. And if you see the whatever console, nothing new because we are not yet called. We have not yet sent the request to S2. Go for the next link. Now, when you say test again, just hover the cursor here. Now I'm making the first request. I'm sending the first request to S2. So will container start the life cycle? 100%. Container now cannot be lazy. It has to start. And then it will start with locate load instantiate. And you will see that whole business of config versus context. So this part doesn't tell you. It just tells you that, okay, you are servicing. All answers are on the console. SOPs are on the console. Did I not add anything? Any SOPs? I thought I had added. Oh yeah, it came. I was wondering where it went. So here, in init of S2, of course, Can servlet to access servlet once initialization parameter? Answer is no. But are the global parameters, context parameters are what? Accessible to anything. So guys, I'm giving you the concept, you can use case it. So if you want to add something like private parameters only specific to servlet, what will you use? Init-param or context-param? Of course, init parameter accessible via config. Great. And if I want to create a global parameter list, what will you use? Context parameter or init parameter, context parameter. And how will you access it? Using servlet context. Makes it easy, makes it understandable, the demo. Likewise, I say, anytime you have a question, I've said so many things. Maybe 10% has reached to 90% is still confusing. Try it out. Try it out with so many examples and all. And whatever you don't understand, of course, discuss with us. So this was a differentiator between config versus context. Yet another loose concept. All I'm taking today is largely the interview exam help. So another one. There's a servlet filter also, but I don't think we can fit it today. We'll take it just before something called a Spring Security. But I can take this short concept. I'll send you. Something called as Web Application Listener. Yeah. So I'm just sending you so that you can open it here. As usual, spend 2 minutes in reading the basic part. And then we'll do the steps and then we'll do the things together. Okay, let us start reading together. What we are talking about is the Web Application Listener, sometimes called as Servlet Listener. It's all about Servlet technology, Servlet framework. So read this. You know from JavaScript so many events. Give me example of couple of events you looked at in JavaScript. So many events you looked at. I know, but you tell me. Yes, on click, on submit, on focus, on property change, on change event. So many. Yeah, mouse events and all that. So now I'm talking about the events in a Java web application. So which are the events? There is no mouse click and there is no form submit and all that. Those are JavaScript events. So, but every now and then requests are getting created. When the client sends the request, who is creating this request object? Web container. So that is when the request object is getting created. And when the response is rendered, the request object is getting garbage collectible, destroyed. So that is an event. Anyone wants to tell me when the session is getting created and getting destroyed? We've spent a lot of time on session. So tell me, when is session getting created and when it is getting destroyed? HTTP session I'm talking about. Give me the method when the session gets created. No, I don't accept this. Which method? We have done the session tracking last 2 days. Get session, request.get session. Session gets created if it is already not bound to the request. And what will mark when will it get destroyed? Invalidate is yes, very right. One trigger. But if user doesn't visit the logout page, what is the other trigger when the session will get destroyed? If I don't visit the logout page at all, the invalidate code will not get called. But will the session be open permanently? No. What is there then? No, server stop is not there. No. Guys, you forgot session expiration timeout. Session timeout. So what is the default timeout value for your this thing? Tomcat is 30. We can of course reduce it to 1 minute or something and we can observe. In short, that is when the session gets destroyed, either via invalidate or via session expiration. Invalidate you have seen. So I can show you that. I mean, expiration. Now, so this is your request level. This is your session level. And the third level you have is context. What is web context? Entire web application. So anyone wants to tell me when will be the servlet context is what? Servlet context. When will be the servlet context object created by the container and when it will be destroyed? Yes, please. Are you understanding the question? I asked you about request and session. Now I'm asking you about the web application context. Yes. Wrong answer, Yash. Yes, deployment time. When you say right click run as and you are deploying a web application, your web application servlet context object gets created and the trigger is, yeah, you undeploy, shut down at that time and reload. That is when it gets destroyed. So these are the occurrences. These are the events which are taking place in your web application. In addition to that, there are so many others. You could be adding a request scope attribute. How? Request.set attribute. Or you could be saying session.set attribute, context.set attribute, or you could be removing those attributes, or you could be changing the values. So these are also taken as all the events. Okay. So of course, I'm not taking them because there are so many examples. I'm just taking you, showing you an example or two. Okay. So now Servlet API, Servlet framework gives you the listener interfaces. All these events are supported by event listeners. So event listeners are what? Classes or interfaces. Event listeners are interfaces. So that you can write a one listener class which can implement multiple events. So what are those typical event listener interfaces? There are many more. Some of them important ones are Servlet request listener, HTTP session listener, Servlet context listener. So things become clear. Before I talk into the steps, let me show you. So just pick up anything you can pick up. So open the Java docs and search for HTTP session listener. You will see the interface. The name of the interface is HTTP session listener, and this is your package. It is coming from your event listener super interface. It tells you, as usual, so many things. For receiving the notification of the events when the HTTP session lifecycle changes. Okay, so I'll ask you a direct question. When you say interfaces have methods. So I have a specific question to ask you. Let's see. I hope you'll give me a correct answer. Who will call this session created method? Who will be the invoking this session created method? Answer of who? Method invoker, typically. Programmer or web container? Who is going to call this method, session created method? No idea, no clue? Take a pick, programmer or web container. Guys, it is a web container, not programmer. This is an event callback mechanism. You say on submit is equal to, you write the event listener method, that arrow function, and it gets called automatically by your React framework. Same. So who is going to call this session created method? 100% web container. When the HTTP session object is created for a particular client. So, and it has got a HTTP session event, which will tell you about the session details and all that. Now, let's see whether you understand the next one. Who is going to call this session destroyed method? Invoker, please. Container. When? Which were the two triggers, which can be either when you call session.invalidate or when session expires, session timeout expires. You got it? So these are the event methods which will get called. Of course, you have to do your bit, but the point is the methods will get called automatically. Now look for something called as servlet, control F, another interface, servlet context listener. So you'll see the other interface. You cannot find it first. You can look up here. So again, it is coming from, it is another type of event listener. And is this talking about changes in HTTP session lifecycle or the servlet context lifecycle? Obvious question, obvious answer. Of course, servlet context lifecycle changes. So now read these two and tell me. First question. Who is going to call these methods? Event listening methods, event notification methods. Answer is the same. Web container. But how many times this context initialized method will be called by the container and when? Exactly once. And when? At the application deployment time. Are you getting it? Whereas when this method will be called by the container, whenever you are shutting down the web application, such as shut down the server, undeploy, redeploy. Okay. So this is your servlet context listener. And at the request level you have, if you say, you can say servlet request, there are multiple. I'm just picking up some of the important ones. You have a third interface, which is servlet request listener, again an event listener, and just answer that. Same, similar method, session creator, session destroyed, context creator, context destroyed, etc. So here, who will be calling these APIs? Container. When? How many times per every request? When the request object is created, it will call the request initialized. So if you want to add a hook, if you want to do something per every request, you can implement this listener and override the method, implement the method. And request destroyed will be called when the response is rendered. You got this? So this is your web application. I mean, these are some of the event listeners methods. Now, if you want to create an event listener, what are the steps? Extremely easy. In ID, you just have it on the right click. But this is all exam objective. And to be precise, to be fair, to be honest with you, none of it, neither config nor context nor web application listener is mentioned in your contents. But guys, on one side, when you are going for the interview saying that I have done J2E, I've done the project in J2E, I've done the servlet. Servlet is the heart of J2E. And you say you don't know about listener, you don't know about whatever that context config, looks horrible. So we are spending some time in explaining that. So coming back to the point, how do you capture all these events? Create a class which implements from the listener interface. So obvious question, can one class itself implement servlet request listener? I mean, multiple interfaces such as all three of them? Possible or not possible? Of course, yes. One class can implement multiple interfaces, but only implementing the interfaces not sufficient. You have to deploy. You have to tell web container that this is my listener. This is my web listener. So which was the annotation we used to tell the container that this is your servlet @web servlet? So how do you tell container whatever follows is a listener? The annotation is web listener. So one option is web listener. Is there an alternative? I said or, not both. Of course, yes. So you have an additional tag here. And what is the tag in the web.xml? Listener tag. Listener has a listener class. And here you supply the fully qualified name of the listener. So again, keep it at a different level. You may not use these listeners in practical at all. But if you want, you should know. So let's take a 5 minutes maybe and write a listener and confirm whether it is working at all as per the expectation. So I'll continue in the same project. No point in wasting time. You can stop the server. continue in day 6.4. And here, let's create a listener. Let's add a listener. So everyone ready? Have stopped the server. Okay. So this has a separate project structure because I told you this is my old project, earlier existing project. It was not created with Tomcat 9. So you don't see any SRC main Java, you just see SRC. So you can ignore that. I'll tell you the steps. Now, the listener is not a servlet. Okay. So right click on SRC, please. We are creating a new listener in 2 minutes. Say new. And can you see a drop down, the ready-made option above servlet called as listener? Found the option? Right click on SRC. It's a Java class we are going to write. New and listener. Choose that. Reached here. Got a listener dialog box. Okay. Now, since it is a listener, it's not a page, it's not a dynamic web page. Give a folder name, give a package name different. So let me call it as listeners. And here I'll say my event listener, or just I'll say, okay, my event listener. I was going to say event listener, but let me not say, let's say my event listener, or you can say better name, custom event listener, anything. Custom event listener. Okay. So done this much. So all I have added is the package name and some class name. Rewinding becomes time consuming. So tell me whether you are here. The others will take a look at it in the lab session. Done? Can I proceed? Okay. So there's no superclass. Superclass is going to be object. So don't mention the superclass. Next step. And now, can you see it has divided it into 3 levels. So the first level is servlet context related events, HTTP session related events, and the request related events. Are we getting it? So it is divided. So like I said, there are so many event listeners. I'm just taking 3 out of many. So check the first checkbox, which says servlet context listener. Then you check HTTP session listener. We are just picking up one from each level and pick up the servlet request listener. Done? So I hope you have taken it is going to implement all these interfaces. Servlet context listener, HTTP session listener, and servlet request listener. Got it? Next step. As you can see, it has collated all the selection and it is asking you what method steps. So inherited abstract method, that's fine, and say finish. So let's look at your generated class. Has the class been generated for everyone? Okay, so this is my common class. In real practice, you can create a request listener, separate session listener, context listener. Generally, we use context listener. If I get time, guys, all it is time permitting. In Hibernate, when we integrate Hibernate with web application, I might take an example of a servlet context listener then, time permitting. So what is this? Who is going to read this annotation? Web container at web application deployment time. And the moment you say this, it knows it is a event listener. And is it going to respond to the events at for all 3 levels, context, session, and request? Answer is yes. Whatever you need, you can add. Now, go further. Looking at them, go little faster. Do you ever need this constructor? You don't. But it's a default constructor, so you keep it or remove it. It's one and the same. Now, add SOPs quickly. So here, all I'm tracing is, I'm just asking you to trace it. So here, in session created, do it little faster. So just read what it is doing. So this is a request destroyed. In request destroyed. Okay. All I'm adding is the tracers. Session destroyed. I can send you the code in a minute if you want. All I'm playing is with the SOPs. Oh. Destroyed. And here I'm saying context destroyed. And context initialized. The whole thing revolves around request session and context application, that is. So, initial. Okay, I'll send you this in case you want. I hope I have not made the copy pasting mistakes. SRC listeners, custom event listener, or you can say our own event listener. Added. Some things I'm showing you here. Looking at time, some things I'm going to ask you to do it in the lab. Okay. So now we are running it. So I want to ask you before I start running this. So here, when you deploy the web application, what is it you expect to see? When you just deploy the web application on the web container, what output you expect to see? Because that will tell me a little bit about your understanding. Do you expect to see any of these SOPs, whatever I have pressed here? Any of these methods, will they get called by the container? Answer is yes. So which one? Yeah, which one? Don't just say yes. Of course, answer is yes. Which one? Which method do you think? Which will be that hook? This is like nothing but a life cycle hook. Which one will get called? Context, you have two things. So be sharp in answering. Context initialized. Are you getting me? So context initialized 100% will get called because that is when you are starting. That is when you are, deploying an application. But you know that, will it get, yeah. When we send the request, I'm just thinking, yeah, request won't be because we'll be actually clicking on this. Anyway, we'll just observe. So why don't you restart the server? I mean, where's my server here? Okay. So you just start the server here and observe and conclude. Everything is in, observation and all that. So tell me, you have an answer in front of you. Which of the following happens first? Will it start executing the eagerly loaded servlet's lifecycle, or will it call the listener first? Answer is there in front of you. Listener, context listener, or your servlet. So context listening happens even before that. So it is a hook. It is a callback even before it starts with the servlet lifecycle. Context initialized. I'm definitely not wasting your time here. So this, which is the method has been called by the container. Context is initialized because web context object servlet context is started. I hope you got it so far. Now go to the client side. And you can say back here. And now tell me, here I'm sending the request to which servlet? S1. Okay, send the request. This part is the same. Open the console, observe and conclude. Are you understanding things at all? So what has happened? The client sent the request, and which was the interceptor we had written. Interceptor means that callback. Request initialized. So has the request object got initialized? Of course, yes, when you send the request and the response is rendered. So request response flow. Request object got created. I mean, request was initialized, it was destroyed. So guys, if you want to do something for every request, you don't have to write it in a servlet. Just write yourself a listener and you can intercept it. Are you getting it? So if you go to the client browser again, here, I'm just, sending a couple of requests and you should understand it immediately. So every time I send a request, request is getting initialized and destroyed. Understanding anything? Understanding from the output, observation is clear or not? Okay. But are you seeing any HTTP session related events, guys? Are you saying session created, session destroyed? You are not. Why? Because why? Obvious question. Why? Because where I have said request.get session. Are you getting me? So there's no session creation. Naturally, there's no session destruction. Are you getting? So I showed you server context initialized, request initialized, request destroyed. So now let us stop the server. So when you say I stop the server, which event will be fired? Which method you expect to see when I stop the server? Context destroyed. The context is nothing but a web application. So try this out, please. And you should see on the console in context destroyed. Like I said, I'm not promising because, like I said, it is all time dependent. But in Hibernate, when we connect Hibernate to your web application, maybe the same case study, content management system, we will use this context initialized, context destroyed. Context initialized we use to load the entire Hibernate framework, and context destroyed we use to clean up all the resources. So they are useful. Some of the events are useful. So now quickly, I've stopped this. Okay, so you just pick up any servlet, whatever you want. You suppose I have picked up servlet 2, and here get HTTP session from the web container. How do I get the HTTP session from the web container? Everyone should know it in the middle of night kind of a thing. Session is equal to request.get session. Okay. So you can add a SOP or something here to confirm like what is happening. Getting session. Servlet is getting a C, sorry, from the web container. Okay. So now you are requesting. I'm not doing anything on that, like adding attribute and all that you have seen. So the moment I say request.get session, what is it you expect to see? Which notification you expect to see? We have had listener there now. So which one? HTTP session created event. But I have not written any invalidate page. That will mean I'll have to link and all those things. So I want to show you the other part, which are the two triggers for the sessions to be destroyed. One is invalidate and the other one is no, reload. Which reload are you talking about? Timeout. Yes. So which is the default timeout value? 30 minutes. Do you seriously want for 30 minutes and delay the lunch break? I don't know about you. So open the web.xml and here add the session configuration tag. Okay. So there is a session configuration tag. The name I'll send you these tags. Are we in 6.4? Yes. Yeah. And then you can see here the timeout, session timeout. Unit is in minutes. It's not exactly that, approximately. And so a minimum I can go is, I don't have a what do you say, fractional values here. So you'll have to wait for a minute at least. So session timeout, I've given it as 1 minute. Save the changes. Shall I give you this? It's all on a control space. Okay. So let's see whether we are able to, your container is really calling those HTTP session listener events notifications. Simply start the server. And watch the console. So only thing which has started is context initialized. I have not yet sent the request. And till the time I don't send the request, I forgot where I wrote that session thing. In Servlet 1 or Servlet 2? In the Servlet 2, I guess. Yeah, in Servlet 2, I got this. So let me give a request to Servlet 2. Please go to client side. You can say refresh or you can go back and whatever. So S2. So observe and conclude. I hope you have given the request to S2/S2, which is Servlet 2. So many things today for you to observe. So keep observing. request initialized, and the request was sent. So init parameter, context parameter, I'm not confusing. We are getting the session from the web container. The moment you say request.get session, which event was fired? Yes, please. The event was session created. You remember that session created, and the request was sent back, delivering the response. So request destroyed. So now to start the timer or something and wait for the session expiration, automatic session expiration. I've reloaded the server. Yeah. So like, it's not exactly, I've observed this, but yes, approximately. So we are waiting for the container to call the session expired, not session expired, whatever, session destroyed. Don't send any request. Yeah, I won't. You are hungry, so you'll hate my small talk. Is it working at all? Yeah. So finally. So this is what it is. So you can use all these hooks. You can all these session destroyed. And this, and when I stop the server, it is of course going to like call context destroyed. So this was a quick look into various application listeners. So I'll of course, as always, will share. And definitely when you visit the lab session, lab, please go through the suggestions, advanced Java lab instructions, and follow that. I'll say that open this project and revise this. That way you do. And after doing the complete revision, then you can finish any of your pending work, including re-looking at that customer flow or completing admin, whatever. I wanted to just talk about introduction to JSP, but that we will do on today's Saturday, right? Yeah, on Monday. So readme sequence. Readme sequence is already mentioned in the sequence. You'll get it, Shubham. Okay. So I will give you the names of the readmes which everyone has to go through. I'll mention separately, Shubham, reading homework. And please spend your weekend. I mean, not whole weekend, I know, part of it at least, maybe 1 hour at the most readme, and you will have no difficulty in migrating from servlets to JSP. That will be all. See you around.